Donald Trump personally hates Justin Trudeau, who he has called a far-left lunatic and two-faced, and despite the 30-day pause on the threatened tariffs, this really matters. Canadians have been left stunned by Trump's threatened tariffs. Meanwhile, conservative Americans, the MAGA influencers, are overjoyed by this. Why? For one major reason, for most Americans watching this tariff war unfold, Trudeau is Canada and Canada is Trudeau. And this is a disaster for Canadians because Americans really can't stand Trudeau, which makes sense because his rock bottom polling numbers and his rock bottom personal popularity are the reason that he resigned last month. In fact, the Liberal Party's overall popularity was sitting at 16% over the Christmas holidays, and Trudeau's personal popularity was sitting at 24%. Trudeau actually admitted in press conferences that he wasn't able to reach Donald Trump after Inauguration Day until after the tariffs were already announced. This is just a disaster when a prime minister of a country that has incoming tariffs can't actually get a hold of the president who is imposing those tariffs. And yet Trudeau, who will not even be prime minister next month, is the face of Canada's response. And in fact, when the 30-day pause on the 25% tariffs ends, he will only have 4 days left as prime minister. Now, granted, there are some other Canadian politicians who are taking to the American airwaves to try to exercise some media diplomacy as well. Chrystia Freeland, who Trump dislikes as much or perhaps even more than Trudeau, informed CNN's dozens of viewers that Americans should just cut it out. We'll see how that works out. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, or as Americans see him, Canada's Homer Simpson, tried talking directly to Trump's viewers by going on Fox News, which is not a bad strategy, but unfortunately, Trudeau has been a punchline on Fox News for years, and the same week that Ford went on to Fox News, the show Fox and Friends was also airing stories like this.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tried to hit back at President-elect Trump, but instead he managed to insult you, all of you Americans out there. You may remember at a recent meeting, Trump reportedly suggested to Trudeau that Canada become the 51st state if the country couldn't handle his border tariffs. Trump then doubled down on the jab, labeling the prime minister the, quote, governor of Canada. Here's Trudeau's attempt at a counterpunch.
We were supposed to be on a steady, if difficult sometimes, march towards progress. And yet, just a few weeks ago, the United States voted for a second time to not elect its first woman president. Everywhere, women's rights and women's progress is under attack, overtly and subtly. But I want you to know that I am, and always will be, a proud feminist.
Now, we aired that clip before, and we noted before Christmas already how insane it was that Trudeau was deliberately provoking Donald Trump just weeks before Trump's inauguration. And notice how Fox and Friends framed that. They framed it to their conservative viewers as an attack on you, the voters who voted for Donald Trump. Now, we all know, and Trudeau certainly knows, that Donald Trump is a very thin-skinned and vengeful person. This isn't an insult. Donald Trump himself has talked about how important revenge is to him. He wrote about it in his book, The Art of the Deal. He doesn't see his desire for revenge as a character defect. For him, it's part of the way he lives his life and part of the way that he does business. That means that Trudeau's decision over the past 4 years to openly run against Donald Trump and his political movement was a catastrophic miscalculation, but an easily predictable mistake as well. As we've mentioned before, one of the things that Trudeau has tried to do is to constantly tie his political opponents, the Federal Conservative Party, to Donald Trump's Republicans. He constantly refers to federal conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's caucus as MAGA conservatives, and he doesn't mean it as a compliment either. Keep in mind that social media has totally changed the way information flows in situations like this, because clips of Justin Trudeau talking about MAGA conservatives, and in fact, the clip you just saw where Justin Trudeau calls himself a feminist and mourns about how Americans had struck a blow against progress by voting for Donald Trump, these went viral on X. Now, back in the day, this wouldn't really matter all that much, but you have to realize again that Vice President J.D. Vance is a very online guy. Many members of the Trump administration, their staffers, are very, very online. And Donald Trump himself is famously very, very online. So the sorts of things that Justin Trudeau is saying in Canada, maybe say at a feminist abortion fundraiser before Christmas, if they end up on X and go viral, it's very likely that the Americans you're trying to negotiate with are seeing that content, which makes it pretty stupid to be insulting said Americans when you're trying to negotiate with them from a position of weakness, because, as Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, once said, living next to the United States is kind of like sleeping with the elephant. When the elephant moves, you feel it. Perhaps Justin could do a little bit of reading on some of his father's own work, as it would have been really helpful before he opened his big mouth and threatened the economic livelihood of Canadians just to take a cheap shot at the incoming president. Now, again, Trump hates Justin Trudeau, and this is a very well documented fact. Of course, there's plenty of really pithy quotes. You have Donald Trump calling Justin Trudeau a far-left lunatic, calling him a number of other very interesting names, all of them unfortunately pretty accurate. And in fact, John Bolton, a former Trump staffer, wrote a memoir, a very anti-Trump memoir, incidentally, after leaving the first Trump administration, called The Room Where It Happened. And in that book, there's one kind of humorous anecdote where Bolton describes just how much Trump can't stand Trudeau. And he noted that Trump actually ordered his staff to go on TV and to criticize and attack Trudeau during TV interviews. Now, you might ask, why did Trump and Trudeau have such animosity? Because it's actually fair to say that at the very, very beginning of the first Trump administration, Trudeau and Trump's relationship was not terrible. And in fact, when Canadian conservative commentator Ezra Levant at one point mocked Trudeau after a visit to Washington, Trump responded on Twitter saying it was actually a pretty good meeting. So why did their relationship go so badly after it got off to an ostensibly good start despite their ideological differences? Well, it was stuff like this.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his French counterpart have been caught on camera allegedly gossiping about President Donald Trump at a reception at Buckingham Palace. Now, in a huddle alongside Princess Anne and Boris Johnson, Justin Trudeau and Emmanuel Macron were caught discussing a 40-minute press conference. President Trump was not mentioned by name, but he had held a lengthy press conference with Mr. Macron earlier that day. The leaders are in London for NATO meetings.
After that story broke in 2019, Trump called Trudeau two-faced. And if you think Trump has forgotten about any of these petty insults or any other slights, real or perceived, I would suggest you haven't been paying any attention to politics or Donald Trump over the past decade. That's not how Trump works. He sees any perceived slight to himself as deadly and in need of immediate retribution. And I think that plays a fairly significant role in the fractious relationship he has going on with Justin Trudeau, the constant references to Trudeau as governor, the references to Canada as a 51st state. His opinion of Trudeau and Trump's well-known penchant for enjoying tormenting his political opponents obviously is a significant part of this, and Trudeau is kind of at fault for that. Conservative American commentators have been celebrating Trump slapping Canada around. Why? Again, because they see Justin Trudeau as Canada and Canada as Justin Trudeau. Trudeau has turned himself into a sort of global symbol of woke gone crazy over the past 10 years. And as the insanity of woke progressive politics have become increasingly clear, Justin Trudeau's sheen has really come off, even in the eyes of the international press. It's not just conservative commentators who have been turning Justin Trudeau into a punchline, which, as I mentioned before, they've been doing for years. There's been a documentary released in the UK about all of Trudeau's crazy policies and pretensions. The Telegraph has written articles about Canada under Trudeau and how woke policies have contributed to the destruction of Canada's cultural heritage. And so now we basically see that this association is badly, badly damaging. And by the way, Trudeau has not slowed down even remotely on his commitment to the woke agenda, even after resigning as prime minister, even in unprecedented financial difficulties, even as his government discusses a potential massive tariff package that would cost Canadians an enormous amount of money. On January 31, the day before the threatened tariffs were announced, before the 30-day pause, the Trudeau Liberals announced a taxpayer-funded federal investment of $41.5 million for 106 projects to, quote, advance equality for 2S LGBTQI plus communities across Canada. That's $41.5 million of taxpayer money. And this was put forward and announced after the threat of tariffs was announced by the Trump administration. Now, Trump's base just cannot stand Trudeau, and they are positively gleeful in watching him get humiliated, especially since conservative outlets like Fox News have been carefully broadcasting his every perceived insult for years, but especially lately. We've seen actually Trudeau intermediaries on outlets like Fox News get challenged when they have previous anti-Trump quotes by themselves quoted back to them. We saw this with Bob Ray and Brett Baer on Fox News earlier this week. All Canadians are now suffering by the collective association with a lame duck prime minister who has already resigned and was forced to resign due to his own unpopularity, but will not recall Parliament in hopes that his party might select a leader capable of beating federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre in the next election. The entire country is put on pause. We have a prime minister who does not have a mandate, just because he is hoping that Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland or whoever replaces him as prime minister will be able to hang on to a minority government or at least reduce the impact of an electoral win by Pierre Poilievre. In MAGA world, Trudeau is frankly a joke, someone who is woke, incompetent, and hopelessly arrogant. Canada's Prime Minister got a big laugh recently at TPUSA, Turning Point USA, America's largest annual conservative gathering in Arizona. Take a look at what that looked like.
Here's the story. President Trump is meeting with Justin Trudeau, who may or may not be Fidel Castro's son. In any case. And by the way, he's totally Fidel Castro's son. Anyway, he's meeting with Justin Trudeau, apparently during the first administration, and he is asking for a bunch of things, right, for Canada to do. And Trudeau doesn't want to give all of them. So Trump says to his people, bring Justin here, bring Justin to me. So apparently they sit across from one another. And Trudeau is talking with the president, and President Trump says, Justin, I want you to tell me, if there were one thing I could do tomorrow to completely wreck the Canadian economy, what would it be? And Trudeau goes, well, I mean, Mr. President, there are a lot of things. You're a very powerful country, but, you know, if you tariffed our cars, it would be really, really bad. And Trump goes, Justin, I want to teach you a lesson. The first thing not to do in a negotiation is answer the question, if you could do one thing to destroy me, what would it be? So, of course, President Trump continues, I don't care about Canada. I only care about America. So, I'm going to tariff all your cars unless you give me what you want. He got what he wanted. Okay, that's how I think President Trump thinks about tariffs.
It is not a good look when your prime minister is the punchline at a major conference. And again, Ben Shapiro emphasized at the beginning of that story that he heard it from somebody very reliable but couldn't divulge who that person was for privacy purposes. And obviously, Trump's personal animosity towards Trudeau is not the only reason for tariffs, and I want to emphasize that. Tariffs are a part of Trump's new foreign policy, and just in the last few days, he has cited all kinds of different reasons for why he was levying massive tariffs on Canada, as opposed to, say, China, which was only getting 10% tariffs compared to Canada's threatened 25%. Talked about border security. He's talked a lot about the alleged trade deficit. He's talked about fentanyl coming into America over the Canadian border. He's talked about U.S. banks not being permitted to operate in Canada and more. So there's all kinds of different reasons that Trump is putting out there. But for Donald Trump, personality very often is policy, and it certainly doesn't help us that he's dealing with somebody who has not only already resigned. Why would Trump want to deal with Trudeau when he could just deal with the next guy? Why would he give Trudeau a win on the way out when he can just deal with the next prime minister? And the fact that he can't stand Trudeau, sees Trudeau as two-faced, sees him as a far-left lunatic, and just frankly has no desire to do anything but kind of torment him and make Canadians suffer by their association with this prime minister. So it matters, and considering Trump's personality, it matters a lot. Trump has just launched an attack on the economy of Canada. There's been a 30-day delay, but the tariff threat is by no means over. And he's doing that against a longtime ally who helped America avenge 9/11 and has long been a close trading partner. And despite the 30-day reprieve, I think that we're going to see a very, very topsy-turvy year. Meanwhile, in Canada, Parliament is not sitting, and Justin Trudeau is trying to negotiate with a man he has consistently belittled and who cannot stand him, while the American right cheers his every humiliation. This trade war was totally uncalled for, I want to emphasize that, and it will, if the tariffs get implemented, hurt the livelihoods of millions of Canadians. But unfortunately, Trudeau helped create this mess, and now we're stuck with him. Trudeau likely hopes that successfully getting that pause on tariffs will help him redefine his massively unpopular legacy. Unfortunately, the fact that Canada and Trudeau have merged in the minds of millions is a huge part of the problem to begin with. Thank you all for watching the Bridgehead briefing. If you'd like to suggest content, please do drop a comment. If you'd like to disagree, please comment as well. If you did enjoy it, like, share, or check out our podcast wherever you download your content. Thanks once again.